Okay. Hello there, welcome to another tutorial. Um, in today's tutorial, we're gonna be looking at borders, margins, and paddings in proper. In our last tutorial, in our box model tutorial, CSS box model, we look at margins and paddings and border, but we want to look at them in depth in this tutorial. If you look at my HTML, I have created a new HTML file called border.html, and I'm gonna be linking this my CSS file to this HTML file. So to do that, I'm gonna use the link tag, and then I'm gonna link it this way. Then I'm gonna specify the address of my CSS file in the href property, and the address of my CSS file is just index.css because they are all in the same folder. Then I'm gonna save it. Now to see this file right now, I'm gonna just come here, come to my browser. Okay, I'm just gonna change this name from to border.html. Okay, good. So if you look at my web page right now, this is exactly what I have. I have a div, and in the div I have a write-up like this. Okay, um, okay, let's go back to our HTML. So I'm gonna give a class, I'm gonna give a class, I'm gonna say box. Oh no, I'm gonna say border like this, right? So what that means is that I have a class in my CSS file called border. Of course, I don't have it yet, so I'm gonna create it as border like this. And I'm gonna look at we're gonna apply some margin. We already talked about the CSS box model in our last tutorial. We talked about the CSS box model where we have the the content the content, then we have the border, which is a line, and we see the padding coming before the border, right? And then we see the margin, which is coming after the border. So we now said because the margin comes after the border, when applied to an element, it spaces the element, right? So is padding if the element has no border, but once you give border to the element, then it looks as if the padding is now part of the element. But no, the padding is just the area after the content of that element. Okay, so we're gonna look at that practically now. Uh, okay, let's look at it practically. So the first thing we're gonna do is that we're gonna give a border to our div. We're gonna give a border to our div. Now, giving border to our div, we have several border classes. So let's start with the border. Let's start with the border width. The border width property specifies the width of the border, and it could take value elements. It could take name values or number values. So the name values include the thin, the medium, and the thick. So the thin, that means it's very thin. We have the thick, and we have the medium. So if I do this and I refresh my page, of course you're not gonna see it because I need to specify the color. So let's see. So we want a thin border, then we want a border color. Let's say we want a border color of let's say a border color of yellow, right? We want a thin border and a border color of yellow. Okay, so then the last element we need to specify, the last property we need to specify is the border style. The border style could take value such as solid, right? It could take value such as solid, dotted, dashed. So we're gonna look at this with us. You can set values such as double, several types of border. So a solid border is just a line, a border with just a flow, a line flow, right? Okay. So let's see how our page looks like now. I'm gonna refresh that. If you look at this, now our border is visible because we specify the border style, the border width, and the border color. So the border width is thin, so we can look at how thick looks like. Say thick, which seems to be the highest in terms of named border. Okay, then however we could also compile. Remember compilation of CSS property? We would also compile the um, the whole of this property into one property called the border to make life easy. So we start with the border width, then we start with the border style, say solid, yellow, and then we continue with the color. So I'm gonna comment all these three properties out, and I'm sure that I'm gonna have the same result. Yeah, the same result. So let's say I change this one from yellow to pink, the same result, right? Okay. Now there are so many other border property. As I said, if you talk about the border style, we have solid, we have the dotted border with dots like this. We have the dashed border, so it will be represented with dashed like this, and so many other border values. Okay, then we have several other border properties such as the border radius. The border radius tends to specify corner edges of the border. For example, if I say border radius should be maybe 4 pixels, then you're gonna see that the edges of my border is curved in 4 pixels. Well, to see the edges very well, let's give a higher value, say 8 pixels, so you can see. Let's change the border style to solid so that you see it. You can see that. Now let's change the border width. Maybe let's use a number, say 2 pixels, like this. Good, you can see that. Now this is our div, at the extreme top here. This is our div, and if you look at it, the content of the div is this right up here. This is the content of the div. Can we change the color? Let's change the color of the content. Let's say color should be let's say white, right? Let's just say white. Good. Now if you look at this is the content. We want to look at how this affects our CSS box model, right? So that content, here it is. This is the content. Then we have the border. We've applied the pink border now, so we have the border. That means the padding comes in between the border. What that means is that if I apply padding to this element, then I'm gonna get a space between this right up and the tick line, right? So I'm gonna apply a padding to that element and see. I'll say maybe padding, let's say 6 pixels, for example. This is, and then I refresh. So if I refresh it, you can see there's now a space. There are now spaces around the content and the border. So now if I apply margin to this element, again margin, you're gonna see the space coming after the border, right? So let's say margin 6 pixels. Then what that do is that it's gonna create a space around it, around the element, around the div. Okay, now margin, you could apply margin top, margin top, we have margin top, we have margin left, margin to the bottom, margin to the right, margin, and then lastly margin can be applied. You can as well compile. If you look at the margin element, there are several ways you can specify value for the margin element itself. If I say margin 6 pixel, what that means is that margin top 6 pixel, margin left, right, and bottom all 6 pixel. Okay, but however I can do something like this. I can say, okay, margin top, I say 10 pixels starting from the top, right? If I say margin 10 pixel, give a space 6 pixel, what that means is that 10 pixels to the top and the bottom, 6 pixels to the right and the left. So if you refresh this, you're gonna notice that we have more space at the top and bottom, but the same 6 pixels is at left and right. So but however, if I specify 4 different values, say 10 pixels, 20 pixels, or no, let's say 30 pixels, then let's say 20 pixels, 10 pixels, and then another 6 pixels. Oh, good. Now what this means is that 30 pixels to the top, starting from the top, going anti-clockwise, or no, going clockwise from the top. So we have the top, we have the left, we have the bottom, then we have the right. So that means 30 pixels to the top, 20 pixels to the left, 10 pixels to the bottom, and 6 pixels to the right. So that's how, these are the different ways you can just quickly specify values. You can see that 30 pixels to the top, 20 pixels to the right, 10 pixels to the bottom, and 6 pixels to the right. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is the float property in CSS. The float property in CSS, for example, if I give a height and a width to my element, let's say I have I want to set a height for this property. Let's say height 100 pixels, right? If I give a height of 100 pixels to this, you can see that that's a height of 100 pixels, and I give a width of, let's say, 200 pixels. So it's a width of 200 pixels. Yeah. So you can see that. Now if I duplicate this box, like this, sorry, okay, I'm just gonna copy it and I'm gonna just paste it here. Oh, sorry, I'm just gonna copy that again. Yeah, I'm just gonna paste it like this. Now if I duplicate it this way and I refresh it, what happens? They come just right after the other. Now because the reason for that is because they are all a box, they are all a block, display. Okay, so we're going to talk about two things here. We're going to talk about the float property. So the float property helps you to push something, to push an element left, right. But what's amazing with the float property is that once you push an element, let's say this element is by the right hand side, once I push it towards the left hand side, then the next element that's immediately below that element tends to what? Goes up and covers the remaining space. If there is a space left, then that element tends to what? Flow up to that space. So for example, I'm gonna just create 3 other classes now. I'm just gonna say I'll say box one. Sorry, I'm gonna say box one, box hyphen one, and I'm gonna say float. The float property will take value of none, left or right. So I'm gonna just I'm gonna use right, say float right. Then I'm gonna apply this class. I'm gonna apply this class to the first. I'm gonna apply it to the first div. Now, can you see this? So maybe you are new to this. A div can have multiple classes. So we could have different classes with different settings, proper CSS settings, and then you can apply different multiple classes to a particular element like this now. So I'm applying the border class as well as the box one class to this div. So what I'm expecting is that the div at the top should float. I want it to float, right? You can see this is div 1 and it has float. So I'm gonna just do something here. I'm gonna give it a h2 like this. I'll say I'll just say box one like this, and I'm gonna copy this. I'm gonna copy all of this and I'm gonna give it to the other divs, but I'll change the number. Okay, so this will be box 2 so that you can see the labelings, and this will be box 3, right? So I'm gonna refresh my page now so that you can see this is box 1 floating to the right hand side. Oh no, sorry, the left hand side, right? It's floating to the left hand side, right? Is that my left? Is that the left? Oh no, that's the right, right? Yeah, that's the right. So it's floating to the right, and you can take a look at box 1 and box 2 going up and taking the space, the remaining space that is just beside of box 1. If I add the same property to box 1 and to box 2 again, floating to the right, you realize that box 2 will just be next to box 1 and box 3 is moving up to cover the remaining space. But however, if you look at it, they are all on a different line because we have about 30 pixels here margin, remember. So but box 2 is just a little bit high up. So but if I add the same property to box 3, say float to the right, what happened? They are all on the same line. So now this is very important because it helps us to create boxes that are just next to one another, right? I'm sure you must have seen boxes that are just next to one another, and this helps us to segment our web page in different segments and sections. You want to have a sidebar somewhere, you want to have a header somewhere, you want to have a footer, you want to have the content area, and so this property, this float property, helps us to create segments. It helps us to easily segment our web page. Okay, so I'm gonna create another web page now. Again, to show the float property, right? So I'm gonna just create a new web page. I'm gonna call it I'll just call it layout.html. So I'm just gonna create. I just want to create a layout using I'll say layout, right? Is the title of this page. So what I want to do now, I want to just create like a simple standard web page. So I'll have the header like this, right? Then I'll have then next, sorry, Next, I'm gonna have the I'm gonna have a div. I'm gonna have a div like this. Then I will have the footer like this. Yeah, right. So the footer is to create a footer where you normally have things like copy. Remember the copyright in our HTML entity. It's a copyright layout dot inc, for example, comma 2022, right? So, but I'm gonna create a class called footer like this. So I'm gonna create a class for this guy as well called the header like this, and then I'm gonna create a class for this guy called the content like this, right? Then I'm gonna create um, I'm gonna create a new CSS now. So I'm gonna create a new CSS. I'll call it layout.css, right? Okay. Then I'm gonna start add this layout.css using the link tag to this page. So I just call it layout.css, right? Okay. Then I'm gonna create all these classes. I already have that header like this. I have another class dot footer like this, and I have another class called dot what content like this. Right. So in my header, I'm gonna give it a height. I'll say a height of 100 pixels. I'll give it a background color. Background color of let's say the background color of can I have something like no. let's just say let's just say lavender like this. Okay, then I'm gonna give it a font size, for example font size of 30 pixels, right? Then I'm gonna make the text align to the center. Remember, can I no okay, no, I don't want the centralized property here. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, so that's that. Okay, the same property, I'll give it my footer, the same property, but my footer, I want the text line to be what, center. Okay, so if I go and view this web page layout.html, so this is what I have so far, because I have no content in my header, so you cannot see anything, but I'm gonna give a content now in my header. I'll call it I'll just give it a div, say div, and I'll call it class. I'll give it a class, a site name. Okay, so I think I'll just do this. I'll give it layout like this, for example. Okay, so I'm just gonna change this class here. I'm gonna remove, okay, so I'm gonna create another class, a site name. I'm gonna do this. So I'm gonna remove this font here. So I'm gonna remove this font from here, and then I'm gonna give it to this guy here. So I want the font size for site name to be this, and I want the font weight to be bolder like this. Okay, so let's see that. What do we have now? Let's refresh this. Good. But I'm gonna give it a padding, of 20 pixels. 20 pixels. So let's see what do we have now. Let's see. Good. Then I'm gonna give my content content. I'll start by giving my content a height. Let's say height 600 pixels, just for an example. So what do I have? Can you see that? So now I have a height of 600 pixels for my. So I'm gonna reduce the font size of this guy from let's say 30 to 20. Good. And I'm gonna give it a padding as well. Give it a padding of 20 pixels, and I'm gonna remove from the footer. I'm gonna remove the height property. So let's just flow based on its content. So it doesn't have a fixed height now. It just flow based on its content. So if you look at this, so far this is what I have. I'm just trying to teach us how to lay out our website. Okay, so we're gonna stop here in this tutorial, and we're gonna continue from here where we stop in our next tutorial.